What is going on, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 10 most disappointing teams for the 2024 college football season. I already talked about the 10 surprise teams, so feel free to go check out that video. But in this video, we're going to focus on the negatives of college football. We are going to talk about 10 teams that had big expectations this year but absolutely crumbled. And at number 10, I have Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin, I don't think they had major expectations, but I was expecting them to at least take a step forward. But they legitimately took a step back and they only went 5-7. They didn't even make a bowl game, and it was embarrassing for the Wisconsin Badgers. There was a lot on the line for Luke Fickell and this Wisconsin team in 2024, but maybe Luke Fickell is not the coach we think he is. Luke Fickell was an excellent head coach at Cincinnati, but he has not been able to get the job done at Wisconsin. He hasn't been able to get that quarterback that can help out that offense, and Tyler Van Dyke went down early in the season. But even if Tyler Van Dyke remained the starter, there was going to be struggles with this team because Tyler Van Dyke isn't a great quarterback either. Not much to say about this Wisconsin team. It was another bad year for them. They had a pretty poor offense and an okay defense, but they ended up having a mediocre season and going 5-7. So next year needs to be a big year for Luke Fickell, or he might have his job on the line and might be in the hot seat. This is the only group of 5 team I'm going to talk about, and this team might be under the radar. Maybe some people didn't expect this team to have a big year, but I have App State at number 9, and I have them at number 9 because I actually picked this team to win the Sun Belt. App State was a disappointment in my eyes because they had returning production. They had a lot of returning production on defense, and they had a veteran quarterback in Joey Aguilera returning, but they ended up going 5-6. I really don't know what happened to this App State team. Maybe it's a coaching issue. Sean Clark has not found major success at Appalachian State. Scott Satterfield was a much better head coach before him. App State has been one of the best group of 5 teams over the last decade. And knowing how their season went last year, going 9-5 and having a good end to the season, I was expecting a big 2024 season for them. But they ended up going 5-6 and going right back to where they were in 2022, going 6-6. Appalachian State was definitely a disappointment. The defense was really bad, and Joey Aguilera recently transferred out as well. This was definitely a disappointing team in 2024. Number 8, I have Virginia Tech. This was a team that was in the top 3 in the country for return in production in 2024. They had an excellent end to the season and dominated Tulane in the bowl game last year. There was high expectations for Virginia Tech. Even if this team only went and won 9 games and didn't make the ACC championship game, it would have been a solid season for them. But it was a disappointment for Virginia Tech. This was the year that they could have got their brand back to being one of those top ACC teams. But they started their season losing to the worst team in the SEC in Vanderbilt, at least the worst team at the time. Vanderbilt is actually a solid team in 2024. But yeah, this was supposed to be the year for Virginia Tech, and they only ended up winning 7 games. They had a better second half of the season, but they just didn't have any quality wins, and they had a struggling season. Actually, they won 6 games. They didn't win 7 games, and they ended their season losing to Minnesota by 2 possessions. So ultimately, they ended up having a losing season, but I was expecting big things for Virginia Tech. I actually picked them to win 9 games. I mean, maybe next year will be the year for Virginia Tech. They do have Kyron Jones returning, but Kyron Jones did not have the 2024 season we expected him to. A lot of people, including me, were expecting him to be a top 5, top 3 dual threat quarterback in the nation. But he wasn't a huge factor on the ground. He only had over 300 rushing yards as a quarterback. I was expecting a big year from Kyron Jones, but that offense was underwhelming and they only won 6 games. And because of that, I have to have Virginia Tech on here. They were a disappointment. Number 7, I have Auburn. They were a major disappointment in my eyes. Look, the 2023 season was a disappointment, so I was expecting a step up in 2024. Peyton Thorne had his first offseason with this Auburn team. Maybe he was going to take that step up at quarterback. They also had some talented young receivers coming in, and they got a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith out of the portal. I didn't see any predictions predicting Auburn to miss out on a bowl game. I saw a lot of people predicting this team to win 8 or 9 games, and I was one of those people. But they ended up missing a bowl game, and Peyton Thorne was just as bad as his 2023 season. He really didn't take any step forward in 2024. And it was a big disappointment. That offense was very turnover prone. Even with all of the talent Hugh Freeze has acquired, that offensive line really struggled. I guess I should have seen the offensive line issues coming, but I thought this team was going to be more better in 2024. They're very talented, but I guess there's still some building to do with this team. I still think they have a bright future, but missing out on a bowl game in 2024 was a big disappointment. And Hugh Freeze has a lot of work to do with this team. I will give them credit. They got a couple of solid quarterbacks out of the portal, and they got a young five-star quarterback in Deuce Knight who was committed to them. So they're really trying to get that quarterback of the future to replace Peyton Thorne, which is much needed. So maybe if Auburn could fill that quarterback position, they will be better, but they also need to get better on the offensive line. And this was a disappointing 2024 season for Auburn. There were so many disappointing teams in 2024, and one of those teams that I was expecting to have a big year was Kansas. Just like some of the other teams under them, they had a bunch of production returning, and they also had a bunch of seniors on their team, and they had their star quarterback in Jalen Daniels. A lot of people were expecting Jalen Daniels to be a top 10 quarterback, and he returned for them this season. But he had a terrible start to the season. He had a terrible game against Illinois, and they lost that football game. They had multiple losses to start the season. They ended up having a good start to the season, but that even wasn't enough, and they ended up only winning 5 games. It was a major disappointment for Kansas. And it makes it even more disappointing knowing how bad Kansas usually is. I had high expectations for Lance Leipold. He completely turned this Kansas team around. He's one of the better coaches in college football, but Kansas went right back into mediocrity in 2024, and it was definitely a disappointment. I hope they can turn it around, but maybe Kansas is just back to being a bad team again in football. And because of that, I do have them on here at 6. I was expecting a better season, but it was a disappointing season for Kansas. On number 5, I have Arizona. How did Arizona only win 4 football games with the talent they had on that team? They had a bunch of star players on defense returning. They had a great secondary with Takario Davis back. And they had one of the best receivers and one of the best quarterbacks in the country, so we thought, in Noah Fafita, and one of the best receivers in the country in Tetairoa McMillan. When you have talented players like that, I expect this team to at least make a bowl game, even though they did lose their head coach and lose some pieces to the portal. This Arizona team still had the roster necessary to win 8 or 9 games. And I actually predicted them to win 10 games. They were one of my sleepers heading into this season, and that's why I have them higher on this list. They were a major disappointment to me. They only ended up winning 4 games, and because of that, I do think they were a disappointing team in 2024. And Brent Brennan just did not have a great first year for this team, and he did not do an excellent job coaching this football team. On number 4, I have Oklahoma State. This team went 3-9 when so many people were projecting them to win the Big 12 and make the playoffs. They had arguably the best running back in the country returning in Ollie Gordon. But here we are in January of 2025, and nobody even knows who Ollie Gordon is anymore. Everybody forgot about him. And it's because he got completely shut down for a majority of the season. This Oklahoma State team just crumbled, and I don't really think it was a talent problem. It might have been more of a coaching problem if I'm being honest. Look, Mike Gundy has been doing this for a long time, but this Oklahoma State team had no business being this bad in 2024. They had a good start to the season, and they had a big win over Arkansas that I actually thought was a decent win. But they went on a 9-game losing streak, and that made it even more embarrassing for them. When you have a running back like Ollie Gordon, you should not win 3 football games. They had so much production returning. They had all 5 offensive linemen returning. They had their quarterback and Alan Bowman returning. They had their star running back returning, and their offense was just miserable. And of course, the defense didn't take any steps forward. They got even worse than they were in 2023. So this Oklahoma State team was a complete disappointment in 2024. At number 3, I have NC State. A lot of people might not have them this high, but I have NC State at number 3 because I was very high on them. I picked them to make the ACC championship game. And maybe I just have blind eyes, I don't know, but I was expecting NC State to have their best season under Dave Doeren. They brought in some big transfer portal pieces, a lot of playmakers. They had their young freshman star receiver in Kevin Concepcion returning, and they had a decent amount of production returning. This defense is always consistently good, and they added some great playmakers on offense and a quarterback in Grayson McCall, who I thought was going to make this team a lot better. But they barely made a bowl game, and they lost to East Carolina. It was definitely a disappointing season. I was really high on NC State, and because of that, they disappointed me even more, and I have them at number 3. At number 2, I have the Utah Utes. They were a major disappointment. The majority of people picked this team to win the Big 12 because they had Cam Rising returning. I was actually not super high on them. I didn't think they would win the Big 12 because I did think rust would be an issue for Cam Rising. And it definitely was an issue, and he got injured again, which was pretty sad to see. And this Utah team was definitely a disappointment because they just fell down again with injuries, and the offense really struggled again. Kyle Whittingham has been a good coach in the time he's coached. He's always fighting to keep this team at the top. But Utah has absolutely fell short. They've had struggles with injuries and development, of course. They only won 5 games this year, and they really struggled. Maybe they'll be better next year with the young quarterback that will be returning. But I just don't see it. Maybe Kyle Whittingham is not fit for this era, and Utah definitely was a disappointing team in 2024. Okay, here we go. If you want to talk about the disappointment of the 2024 college football season, it is Florida State. I have Florida State at number 1. Mike Norvell, what are you doing? Look, I could go on talking about this Florida State team for like 20 minutes. It's pretty simple. They only went 2-10. They were a disappointment. Everything from top to bottom was terrible. The only good part on this team was the defense, but even that was disappointing. They were not as good on defense as I expected them to be. And DJ Uiagalelei might have been the worst pickup in transfer portal history in college football. Look, it wasn't just DJU. That whole offensive line, that whole offense was bad. They had no playmakers, nothing going for them on offense. And the coaching staff just could not coach. I don't know what they were doing this year. Florida State was just an absolute disappointment, and the transfer portal did not work out for them in 2024. And because of that, they went 2-10, and they were the most disappointing team for the 2024 college football season. But anyways, that is going to do it for this video. You guys let me know your most disappointing teams down in the comments below. But let me remind you guys to like the video and also subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And if you guys love college football, then you'll love this channel because we upload a ton of college football content and we basically cover everything on this channel. So definitely consider subscribing and also consider checking out my socials down in the description below. But that is going to do it, guys, and peace out.